Welcome, my friends, and welcome to Chloe Goodchild. Thank you so much for being with us, dear.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Yay.
Really
I'm
wonderful.
feeling joy. It's like this effervescent joy and celebration to be meeting you and having this conversation about voice and mantras for peace.
Me too. Really excited. Hmm.
Yeah. So, would love to just have you tell our global community of peacemakers and aspiring peacemakers just a bit about who you are and what you do in the world.
Okay. Well, thank you, Anandra, for this opportunity for us to explore this, because I can hear just that we are both absolute lovers of sound, from the year dot, I would imagine, from the birth, our own biological births. But so for me, I run something called the Naked Voice Foundation. And so that's a global community now. And I'm based in England right now. So the land where they're pulling down all the colonial statues as we speak. And it's an incredibly powerful time, isn't it, to be alive? And I'm aware that there is this increasing fascination with voice and with how we can personally and collectively, really express our authentic voice. So the naked voice, I coined the phrase "the naked voice" in 1990. And that was following a transformative experience that I had in India, in fact, when I happened upon non-dual communication in a big way. I was very, very blessed. And that was really, at that time, that was really the end of at least 2 or 3 decades of, seeking and searching out, why am I here? What am I doing here? Why is no one, why at school is everybody teaching me everything but what I really want to know about? So, so quite a challenging, a wonderful education, intellectually. And I then studied music in Cambridge and came out of Cambridge realizing that I'd been gifted this incredible repertoire of sacred music, for example. But still something was missing. And it's as if sound itself kept on taking me up and out of my body, not bringing me down and in. And and it's so interesting, isn't it, that the connection with sound. I mean, certainly in the Sufi tradition with Hazrat Inayat Khan, who it was such a relief to hear him say that for his tradition you receive sound from the cosmos and it comes down through the crown of the head and down into the body and on down. And that was just so helpful to me. But it was really my journey to Africa initially at the age of 18 that first of all really introduced me to the instinctual voice. My dad was a bishop, a Protestant bishop, Episcopal bishop, and so I was brought up in quite a rarefied Christian household. They were doing their best, but it was quite psychotic as well because because they were doing their best, but they had these really gave birth to 5 very sort of hormonally charged, very, challenged and questioning children. So that's my gratitude to them that we had this opportunity. So long story short, my travels in Africa, in the Middle East, and then finally in India, and my connection with the saint, the great luminary Anandamayi Ma. So that it was really my connection with her that disappeared my ordinary mind, shall we say.
Mm.
And so I was blessed to meet someone called Punjaji at that time, was since called Papaji. And Gangaji I knew very well. We both met Punjaji at almost the same time. And it was really, I spent 6 days with him. And those 6 days completely altered the course of my life and also my relationship with sound. Sound,
Mm.
as the voice of spirit. But for him, of course, it's the sound of silence that really is the true sound. So his instruction to me was to come back to England and to be silent. And it was really from that experience and in that silence that I started to hear everyone's voice, as a naked voice. That was the only word I could find that didn't have any political, religious, or, sociological connotations.
It's a bit sexy though.
Sorry?
It's a bit sexy though.
It's quite sexy. We like that.
Just
Come
don't want
on.
to let, I'm not going to let that one slide.
Let's be clear why we're calling it the
You
naked
did
voice.
say you're not going up and out, you're going down and in. Just
Well, that's been my journey, let's be clear. And in India, of course, they have a whole in India, of course, they have a whole language for that, tantric, the whole language of tantra and mantra and yantra suddenly were, made perfect sense to me. And I was having very powerful experiences in the early 90s with sound, with energy. And it was really, I discovered it was through mantra that my whole body was really able to calm down and to align itself and to navigate this huge new upsurge of energy that was blasting through the system. And it was really the mantra itself that just brought me home to myself. And that was really the beginning of the Naked Voice. And since then, it's become a kind of global community because from that moment onwards, even though I was a vocal therapist at that time, I was much more of a therapist within the context of a kind of psychological, historical narrative conversation. And suddenly, having met Punjaji and Anandamai, it was about how sound can really disappear the narratives now,
yeah. Yeah.
so we can,
Yeah.
and that became a whole pedagogy of work that we've developed since then.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you had that moment when the spiritual dimensions of sound open up to you.
Yes,
Um,
yes. Great, great blessing.
like you caught the resonance that was being embodied through these teachers that you were working with, and Anandamayi is the one who is full of ananda, the
Absolutely,
bliss. So
absolutely.
and when you're so full of bliss, you can't. It's silent. Like only the silence can contain that.
Exactly. In fact, it's interesting you should say that because even the need to sing disappeared.
Uh huh.
It
Yeah.
wasn't, it was just like, as you say, the silence was just complete unto itself. There wasn't, so that experience of the nada, of the inner sound, started happening. And it was like, wow, 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 thank you.
Gosh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk more about this one on in our friendship,
Yes.
but
It.
I think it's something interesting because I'm actually personally I'm in a phase like that right now too, where I just even though I teach voice, I teach mantra, I'm helping people learn how to lead chanting experiences that are amazing, but like I
Yeah.
don't want to sing. I'm just
Yeah.
I'm in a different phase with that right now in my personal practice, and it's really nice to hear.
Beautiful.
It's really lovely to hear that you have been through that too, and that that's a part of the cycle or the evolution the
Yes.
natural cycle.
Right.
I guess I was willing to reveal that about myself for our audience that is watching and listening, um, because maybe there are some other people who have gone deep into a sound-based practice and been disciplined and rigorous and devoted, and then all of a sudden,
Yeah. Yes.
you know, the stillness is absorbing.
Yeah.
And
No need for anything.
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure this is probably also the same for you. That the teachings you receive from these extraordinary masters, which I mean, they all end up in the same place, which is just simply, that oneself is all there is.
Yeah.
Oneself is all there is. I was very blessed to meet Richard Lanoy, who is one of the great photojournalists from England, who took a lot of the photographs of Anandamayi Ma in would have been the 40s and 50s. And he became an incredible mentor to me because it was those photographs of her that completely captivated my life after I'd had this connection through Ramdas with Anandamayi. So it's incredible for us to be aware also how the presence of these beings carries on through the visual image. They are like yantras, really. They're like spiritual mantras. Just looking at these extraordinary, images of total compassion, total unconditional loving presence.
Mm. It
And
makes me
this.
think about mirror neurons.
Say more about that. Yeah.
It makes me think about mirror neurons,
Yes.
which is the guru principle explained in um, neurobiology, right?
Lovely. Yes. Yes.
Where you see something modeled, and
Right.
then you imagine yourself in the modeler's being doing that thing, and
Yeah.
then your neurons fire in the same pattern that they're firing,
Beautiful.
and that's one of the amazing things that makes us human, is that
That is
we can
beautiful.
we can that's why we can evolve. So that's why that's why we're so plastic, so changeable.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the whole nature of transmission, which is what you're also pointing to. It's just so great, isn't it? How modern science is really becoming a new kind of mystical language for all of this.
Yeah.
You know, which makes.
Let's talk about that in terms of the voice, and your
Okay.
work with the voice, because I think you and I are on the same page in that there's such power in the voice and such healing potential in the voice. Um, but I'm really curious about uh, how you have found ways to help model that naked voice and bring that out in other people.
Aha, aha. What a lovely question. The first thing that comes to mind is humor, actually. And Anandamai was a great one for laughing. I think there's something about transferring to people this understanding that our the language of love, which is sourced from silence, right,
Mm.
is such an immensely joyous thing, you know. And that joy is irrepressible once it enters you or once you remember it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And that then seems to activate, certainly in the belly. So in our work, we work with the three centers of the three main power centers: the belly, hara, the heart center, and the pineal gland. And so I always love to start, particularly with people that are still kind of fixated on this kind of outworn idea that they don't have a voice, or that having a voice means being able to sing really well, which is so not what we're talking about. You know, with
Talk a little bit more about that, please, because I think that's such a common and very damaging idea that we've been given.
it is astounding to me that so many people, however rich or however poor, however successful or unsuccessful in kind of modern day terms, will take you into their confidence and say, you know, however brilliant something they've just done, they will come back to themselves, yeah, but I'm still really trying to find my voice, you know. And you then start to inquire, well, what does that really mean? What does that mean to find your voice? And, you know, you soon realize that it isn't about, it has nothing to do with the desire to impress others, you know, to perform, you know, to have to sort of show up and entertain. These were the kind of quite sort of inadequate. I mean, they all have their fun quality to them, of course. But what we're speaking of is the voice that really is resourced from the source of who you are. And that involves such immense, it's like a combination of gradual revelation and grace. That's what Anandra used to say. You know, she say, so it is actually a graceful act. You find yourself really hungry to find your voice. That's a really graceful act. Then there's gradual revelation, which is where you have to be willing to really fall in love with your situation, who you are, the whole story, the whole bang shoot, you know, of who you are with all neuroses, the whole spectrum of craziness and madness and etc.
The lawnmower guy is right outside. I'm just going to
Oh,
close the
great.
window, but keep going. They can hear you.
So, so, so laughter is, I find, is a really fantastic way into this, particularly for people that think they haven't got a voice or they're busy. You know, the egoic mind is still busy trying to tell them to have nothing to do with this whatsoever. It's dangerous. It's going to be painful. It's going to be really hard, and it's unlikely you're going to find it. And it's like, you know,
put a joke in and catch them off guard, and then they start laughing.
you got it. You got it. The whole thing is about that. The
That's
whole thing is about that.
wow, brilliant.
It has, I mean, you know, and the beautiful thing is the laughter muscles, of course, are in the first three chakras. So you are already activating those first three chakras when the laughter is happening. And the other side of laughter, of course, is tears. Brilliant. So people say, well, this is actually making me feel really, really sad or really quite tearful, actually. And you go, oh, that's fantastic. Wow, that's great. That clearly means that you are connecting psychophysically with your emotional body as well, which is wonderful. It's like your soul is going, oh, you're listening to me at last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I love that. And you know, like, so you have three diaphragms too, right? You have the pelvic
sure.
floor, the vocal the one on the rib cage, and then in the throat. And if you're having a full belly laugh, you
Yeah.
are fully using all of your diaphragms.
Oh my God.
And that just brings, yeah, I mean, I hope everybody watching, listening has at least laughed until you cried at some point in your life. But yeah, it makes you feel a lot like you feel alive, and you
Exactly.
can't not feel what you're feeling.
Absolutely that. Absolutely that.
Okay, all right. So feel free to crack a joke anytime.
Well, I mean, just even laughter itself, just actually, if you just, if you just start that up, it's impossible not to,
It's gonna be
you know.
contagious.
So, and
And
it
then when you
was.
start snorting,
Oh, I love that in your movie with Philip Helmick when he
oh,
started snorting.
you start snorting. I remember.
And that was so touching because you were really enjoying him snorting, or it was just great. It was really great. So to activate the full spectrum of human emotion is what we're talking about, really, isn't it? Because the
Yeah,
voice then
yeah,
gets, which is basically the what is it? It's the full spectrum of who you are. It's the full colourful spectrum of who you are. And of course, that's why Indian vocal practice and vocal philosophy is so exquisite, because you don't have to modulate, you don't have to go somewhere else, go over to that key over there or that key up there or down there. You just stay with one unchanging note, you know. And that, of course, is the great beauty. And I think we both play harmoniums, don't we? So
yeah.
this, can you hear that? Yeah. So in the early days of our teaching, we used to literally just sing the one note for about 5 days without stopping.
Mm,
And then we'd start moving into the second and the third. And then
mm,
people would realize the direct connection between the musical chakras and their own journey through what we call the musical octave of consciousness, from the root to the crown and back. Obviously, in
mm,
India, it's called the Saptak, the seven steps,
mm,
and so on. And that really is, that then translated itself into what we call the seven sounds of love. So that each musical chakra actually activates a location of love, a location of consciousness that gives birth to 1,000 songs,
mhm,
every chakra, 1,000 ways of love, you know.
mm, mm.
And it's,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah. So I guess the key point for me and a lot of what you said is that finding your naked voice, it
right,
requires you to step out of the expectation of performance or pleasing others and
exactly.
go into the inner dimension of your own experience with the voice. And that's my
Beautiful,
paraphrase.
absolutely. Absolutely that. So you're literally sinking through the barrier of the personality voice, and
Yeah.
and in that process, you then have to retrain the egoic mind to understand it's got a new job,
Yeah.
you know, which is not
Yeah.
to judge, not to criticize, not to blame or shame or play any game whatsoever, but to
Hmm.
become curious, to become fascinated, to be really interested in what's happening here, you know.
Mm. Yeah.
So that's a very important piece. Yeah.
And getting there through laughter.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant strategy, Chloe. Just so good. I like that that's actually in your pedagogy.
It
Like,
is absolutely a requirement.
okay. I'm thinking, okay, how to add that in my teacher training manual. Um,
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely go for it.
I love it.
Yeah,
Um, okay, so all of this is, I think in so many ways really fundamental for anybody who wants to use their voice as an instrument of peace.
exactly.
Like if we want to be able to make a tangible contribution to a more peaceful world,
Right.
uh, discovering our voice and feeling free to
Yes.
listen to our voice and share our voice is one would think that that's fundamental, you
Oh,
know, as
yes.
a stage of personal development in order to come into your potential there. Um, One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot these days, really in the last 4 or 5 years, as I've been kind of educating myself about the intersection between patriarchy and racism, and
Mm.
it's all tied together. You know, the
Oh, yeah.
colonialist
Mm.
mindset
Mm.
and the dualistic mindset of up and out kind of spirituality versus down and in and up and out. You know, that
Right.
kind of
Yeah. Both
more
and. Mm.
tantric
Mm.
embrace of everything that's alive in us.
Yes. Yes.
To put it, you know, to make a gross summary of that concept. But so I've really been questioning for myself how much finding your voice and expressing your soul and authentic voice is is a privilege. And
Ah.
I'm looking at that for myself, and I'm really I don't have the answer for sure, and I want to ask you about how you're feeling about that. I mean,
Mm.
I'm a privileged white woman,
Mm.
and I've had many opportunities. I'm a woman, so to some degree, my voice has less value than a man's voice in this world.
Okay.
But in most other respects, I'm cisgender, I'm heterosexual. You know, I tick off most of the boxes of privilege
Mm-hmm.
in how I live and how I express myself. Um, and so I really I'm wanting to explore that idea and understand, um, you know, does this apply
Mm.
to
Mm.
people who have been underprivileged historically, systematically, marginalized consistently, and really undervoiced
Mm.
and undervalued for their
Mm.
voice.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a whole big topic. I'd like to know your
Mm.
thoughts about that.
Wow. Well, I mean, well, what comes to mind, quite a few things come to mind in terms of my own experience of singing in different places, different contexts. But also, I'm just really reminded of, like rhythm and blues and how, and folk song and music as it was experienced by people in villages, and it still obviously is experienced in indigenous, still where there are cohesive, which are, indigenous communities, for example, where sound is still, oh, thank God, an integral part of everyday life. It hasn't even become something that we're compelled to do for our own spiritual practice or because in service therapeutically for others, whatever our impulse is. These are people for whom they wouldn't even think about sound as being,
Mm,
in any way separate from. And I've learned so
definitely not commodified like air or water or earth,
right.
soil.
Yeah.
Like it's just natural.
It's just absolutely integral, which it is, as we know, for absolutely every human being on this planet, however rich or poor, however great the challenges are or not. I mean, there are people that have come out of the most immense poverty and, incredible life challenges, uh, for whom the voice is just it's their great inspiring leading force that exists within them, and where did that come from? It didn't seem to make any difference whether they're coming out of a really kind of what we might consider to be a really devastating environment or a really poor environment. I'm aware of the people who've taught me so much, like the Pegani up in northern Montana, And I was invited there by one of my students, my Irish students, who had just felt the call to go and work with them, to learn from their values, their wisdom values. And they were really under immense duress on this reservation, right? It's like, what are we doing? You know, beautiful beings. I mean, the medicine bundle carriers, and Darnell and Smokey, and basically, we meet in this Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant, and we're talking, and they're looking at me like I'm some kind of white middle class spiritual shopper. You know, it's like highly suspicious. You know, it's like
Right.
I was the one that had the problem.
You know,
You know,
but that's what we
yeah,
look like.
that's what we look like,
That's
and
where that's the packaging. Yeah.
that's the packaging. There's nothing we can do about it, you know, and we are genuinely wanting to learn how we can literally still how we can find who the hell we are, you know, prior to the colonial narrative, prior to all the kind of structural violent narratives that we've all had to find our way through, rich or poor. And so I'm with them, and they go, and I'm going, I'd really like to understand your values, about how you listen so deeply. They were telling me these amazing stories about how they navigate with the bears to eat the blueberries. Who's going to eat the blueberries first? You know, so they have this whole conversation. I mean, telling me amazing things about this complete unicity with nature, you know, and their capacity to imagine being able to navigate and negotiate with a bear as to who's going to eat the blueberries first, you know. So we're having these incredible conversations, and they're telling me about just incredible stories, and then the struggles with what they call the white grandfather in Washington, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm going, and so they say, so we actually can't share anything with you till we've heard your sound.
Mm.
So I said, wow, thank you. So that was the deal. They took me off into the dark night. We went driving to their little house. We got to their house, and they sat me on a chair at the other end of the room, and they said, right, sing. And that was it. And I was like, it was like comeuppance for all the years that I've been in different places, in prisons and in different contexts in England, working with people right across the whole socioeconomic structure, and just saying to them, don't think, sing. You know. And now it was my turn. And so, because of these amazing stories they share with me about nature and the way they communicate with nature, non-verbally, etc., I thought, okay, I'm just going to sing this Sanskritic chant. You know, I'm from England. I've led, as you say, a so-called privileged life, but actually a very repressed, psychotic, dysfunctional life as well, you know, albeit within a kind of upbringing of hopefully understanding the essence of Christian values, which is not necessarily what's taught in church. So here I am with them, and I just start singing this. I said, I'm going to sing you a chant which is in praise of the Mother of the Universe. And I just started singing, Om Ananda Mai Chaitanya Mai Satya Mai Parameshwari. And I carried on for about maybe 5 minutes. And this is a chant that is so close to my heart that I just thought, I'm going to make this my humble offering in this moment, and we'll just see what the outcome. We have no idea what the outcome is. And I just knew I had to show up in my, as best I was ordained to do so, so to speak. And I got to the end of this and it was really silent at the end. And when I opened my eyes, they were in my face. They were looking at me like I was some kind of really weird scientific specimen, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because they said, we have no idea. I said, how did you find that? You know, they were just like, we don't understand how you did that. And I said, did what? And they said, well, you've just sung a melody, a rhythm whose vibration is this absolutely identical to one of our secret high pipe ceremonies.
Mm.
And I was like, we were just beyond words. We were just beyond words, you know. So that taught me a lot about privilege of sound itself. That sound and our access to sound, as we can find it from the absolute ground of our existence, is the most incredible privilege. And that is accessible anywhere. I remember coming across it in Magallbury prison. This incredible guy that said to me, Chloe, this was in Ireland. He said, Chloe, he said, can you change a really bad voice? You know, and I looked at him and I said, John, this isn't, as far as I understand, we're in this conversation because there is no good or bad about what we're doing here. You know, we're all in this room together. We're all in this life together, you know. And he just looks at me, and then the other guys in the room just go, John, give us a song. Give us a song, John. And he goes, oh, no. I'm not going to do that. So they then go rushing over to the other end of the room, and they bring back his guitar, and he starts singing, If Tomorrow Never Comes. I mean, it was so profound. And I guess I'm just remembering these stories as you're asking the question, because my experience of the concept privilege is that we have kind of projected it onto a kind of upstairs, downstairs privilege, you know, rather than privilege which for me in its original sense is something that we all, however great our suffering is, and there is no suffering too great for human song. That's my understanding. That's what I've learned from working in many, many, many diverse situations. Like up in the Hindu Kush, right? These are people that we would describe as poor, right? They're some of the happiest people I have ever, the most generous people I have ever met in my life. And their connection to sound like no other, you know. So again, it was like my privilege to, how was I there? Well, my husband was working with, helping to explore earthquake-resistant structures. And so we were there on a Royal Geographic expedition of so-called privileged, educated Western people actually coming to learn that these people didn't necessarily, they weren't too concerned about earthquake-resistant structures. It's like they just really wanted to share their Hunza apricots, you know,
Yeah.
etc.
So I guess
Does this
if
in some...
if I paraphrase, tell me if I'm getting this right. I hear that one of the threads I hear in what you're saying is that the privilege, the way you want to use the word privilege, is the privilege to be connected to your authentic sound,
I
and that
think
that's the richness
that's
and
the
the
privilege.
power, and that the societal structures, the social structures of privilege and power, are not what you define as privilege.
I define that as pain.
Yeah. Hmm.
Serious pain, particularly, I mean, obviously, you and I have been very blessed. We've been very graced in our lives. We have come out of that kind of colonial background, so to speak.
Yeah.
But neither you nor I are identified with that, right?
No, but I'm not. I can't. I can't but be aware of the glaring irony that
Yeah.
and I've had similar stories to your one with the tribe in Montana, where like you're asked to sing something that's closest to your soul and the most natural, authentic thing for you, and you don't have anything from your own birth culture that you can draw on.
Right.
You don't
Yeah.
have the Celtic, the Druid, the pagan, like that was obliterated 1,000 years ago from the culture of your land where you and your family and your ancestors grew up. So you had to go looking to the country that Britain colonized, you
Absolutely.
know, like holy,
Yes. Yes.
right? And then
Us.
like you're going to India, which Britain colonized, just for the record, for anybody who didn't get that history. And then you go to America, which was another colony of Britain, which took over the native indigenous. And I mean, it's like the domino effect
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
insane.
It is insane, isn't it? It is insane. And I think what's most insane is how we're not yet. I think there's a chance this could now change.
Mm.
I think there's a chance it could change. But it would seem, if you just kind of buy into what the media is showing us, that the egoic mind is still the reality TV for most people. And, and the connection with physical matter, with, greed and need, is still very, very dominant. And the whole relationship of power, love of power as opposed to power of love, basically.
Yeah.
And so that, and it's so interesting. If you look back over, what was it, Greg Braden's, 25,000 years, we've done this, we've come up against this, like, this is like the sixth time now. Here we are again. We've 5 times we have gone through the whole, self-destruction, collective destruction of the egoic mind yet again, you
Mm.
know. And here we are now. Yeah, I think there's a chance. There's just a small chance, with everything going down as it is, that the human voice can actually offer something the likes of which has never happened before. And this is, I think,
I'm
is
down for
thanks
that.
to, yeah, new science is coming in the most extraordinary way as this kind of new mystical language of interconnectedness. So it's not, we're in a world of collapsing dimensions between different disciplines, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So, and they're all, the ones that are waking up are all serving each other, right? And so there is an astonishing, and albeit under the radar at the moment, perhaps thankfully, maybe, is an astonishing increase in the numbers and thousands of people that are waking up to the impact of these collapsing dimensions, which are scary to the egoic mind, but not to the one that knows there is no death and there is no birth. So what's the big deal?
Oh,
Yeah, I
well,
mean,
first of all, I just to back up for a second, I'm not familiar with the Greg Braden narrative that you're talking about, so I'll just kind of let
okay,
that float for the people who do know what that is.
okay,
They can look it
yes,
up. But there's some really important threads in this that I'd like to bring together. The idea of your naked voice being your wealth and your privilege. And again, I'm paraphrasing. I apologize if I'm not
Yeah, that's fine.
catching it right. Um, and and the opportunity to wake up. But I want to highlight what you started with, which was that sound was taking you up and out instead of down and in.
Right.
And for me, there's also a real danger right now in this moment. We're in, just for time stamping this interview, it's July 2nd, 2020, or July 3rd, maybe, I think it's July 3rd, 2020. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, and there's a lot that's uncertain, and there are probably more people that are more deeply afraid than at any one point in time in our recent history. And there is a, in my view, a another layer of the virus, which is magical thinking and spiritual bypassing, and a real dangerous kind of conspiracy dialogue that's going on,
Yes.
where awakening is code word for let's get out of here.
Let's leave. Yes.
Yeah, like let's enter in the fifth dimension, and and I feel really concerned about that, because that's the opposite of a down and in embrace and a real like hands in the dirt, like massaging of the possibility of making something new. And we can't make something new until the old has composted. But it makes me kind of want to also tie in one other element that I wanted to speak to you about, which is trauma. And
Right.
how, because we are all traumatized.
Yes.
We, very few people on this planet have lived an experience, or if anyone has lived an experience of embodied wholeness throughout the entirety of their lives.
Yes.
Maybe, I mean, we would like to idealize and romanticize that there's some indigenous culture untouched somewhere, but there isn't. There's no one that has not been touched by the violence, of colonialism, and
Yes.
and and so trauma and the voice. Like for me, the uprising of that resilience and the ability to regenerate and grow is deeply connected to the voice. So I would like, that was all a big long kind of summary and setup for you to talk about trauma, and then we'll wrap it
Well, yeah, no problem. Well, it's interesting. What I'm noticing, certainly over the last 30 years, since I've been working with people with trauma, from working with the trauma, is starting to really learn how to respect the trauma. Number one, when I first came back from India in 1990 and realized, that there was no training out there for this, I had to just start. And so I put up a notice in my local community hall, and I just went, does anybody want to find their voice?
What year was that?
That was 1990.
Oh,
So that's 30 years ago, literally. This is our
I was
30th.
12.
Oh, sweet.
I would have signed up.
You must have been there somewhere, that's for sure. You were inspiring it, that's for sure. And to my astonishment, 30 people showed up. And we started on Tuesday mornings, we started these groups. Now, I've been like, nobody had taught me anything about this, so I knew how singing Indian scale and the power of raga. I knew how powerful that was and how that was impacting my whole energetic system.
Mm.
So I was speaking from there with them. And so, but what was really interesting, I thought it was going to be more of a musical kind of interchange as I had been taught it.
Mm-hmm.
But that went out the window the first session because so I would say to people, how do you feel about your voice, and how does that sound? So people would go, what do you mean? How do I feel about my? It's like, and there was this one amazing woman who used to come. It was the only thing she would get out of bed for, was to come to this sounding session. And the inquiry, we were just doing inquiry, just like, who is singing? Where is the sound coming from? Well, that was really interesting because those questions themselves seem to bypass in the right direction their connection with the pain, or the unrest, the nervousness inside. And we combine that with what quality of silence does your voice leave behind? So it ceased to be an anxiety about performing, like being heard at all. Suddenly everybody was actually listening for what quality of silence the sound left behind. And so what I started to learn from them and from that was that trauma is a kind of fierce gift. And I mean, I really don't say that lightly. Mm. Yesterday, I was just working with a woman who'd been gang raped by 5 guys at once. And she got the radical blessing of it. And now that is really radical to say that. So to come back to these people, and I'm just saying that we are in a time where people are realizing the intense medicine that authentic sound is offering us. We do not have time anymore to have the privilege, if you like, which is what most people, moneyed privileged people, would have, to go through 30 years of therapy and trying to unravel what happened when you were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now it's like, okay, so you had that radical event in your life. How did that sound? And what sound is missing in the body? What sounds are missing in the body? Mm. So these questions somehow seemed to, it's like homeopathy, that once the trauma, whatever it is, whether it's physical, it's psychological, or spiritual, it's like once it knows it's heard, it relaxes,
Yep.
And then, so this woman who just got out of her bed every Tuesday, she knew she was coming because she was going to be heard at a level that was deeper than mental inquiry, And at the end of which, by about, I can't remember which week it was, but suddenly she came out with this incredible, like, I'm struggling with my monster. She came out and she was like, rah, and all of this. And I was like, whoa, and the whole group was like, wow. It was magnificent because what we were listening to was the sound, not the story.
Yeah.
The sound. And that sound was this fierce gift that some kind of psychotic upbringing had given her. Mm. She leads a Latin American band. That is what happened.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know many stories like this, of where trauma is bizarrely, so we're not talking about no way bypassing, we're talking about going in.
Yeah.
As you were saying.
Yeah.
There's another more
in a way, like the crisis that you have personally have been through is what shapes you literally. I mean, it shapes your brain and your nervous system
right
into the pattern that you
right
body. And
yeah,
And that makes you a perfect vehicle. That makes us a perfect vehicle for helping other people who've had similar experience if we choose that path as of a
Right.
of a healer or a servant. Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
May I share another story with you?
Yeah.
How this relates to a more collective environment?
Mm.
Because there was a moment a few years ago when His Holiness the Dalai Lama was invited to come over to Northern Ireland to for peace talks between the opposing sides. So you had the Protestants on one side, you had the Catholics on the other. And there's this massive, what's called, believe it or not, the peace wall that divides them, not unifies. And whenever anybody comes from another, I know. So it's like to keep
You're gonna let
that.
that one slide because holy moly, the
Yeah,
idea of building walls to create peace. Okay, fair enough. Yeah,
yeah,
not the
exactly.
paradigm I'm investing in, but yeah, go on,
Yeah.
carry on. Sorry.
Well, so what happened was I was invited along with a group of Celtic singers, Tim Wheater with his amazing flute, and all kinds of amazing Gaelic singer, Deirdre Ní Chéineada, and a group of us just simply to make the music, to hold the music in this rainy car park because we had to find neutral ground that wasn't kind of threatening to either side. And then His Holiness was going to come in with the two opposing religious leaders, right? He was going down the peace walk, talking to people, embracing people, blessing people, all the way, all the way, all the way. And it took a long time. Meanwhile, we had the paramilitary within a few feet of us, and then about 5,000 people. And we heard that there was unrest because there were Chinese Buddhists that were questioning why the Dalai Lama was. I mean, it was just very, very hairy. And we were surrounded by security guards, and they said basically, just to let you know that once they open the gates between both sides, the children will probably start throwing stones at each other, and they may throw stones at you as well. But we can get you out of here in 20 minutes. So is that okay? Well, we're already there. So there's not even a question. So it's like what to do, right? So Tara is the sacred hill of Ireland. And she's also, as we know, the compassionate goddess, right? So we thought to ourselves, let's sing the Tara mantra. We sung that mantra like I've never heard it. I mean, we, the big we, because once everybody realized we were singing the sacred mountain for the sacred mountain, which is older and deeper than the polarity of all conflict present in the present situation, everything calmed down. And His Holiness was taking such a long time. The security guards kept on coming and whispering in my ear, he'll be another 20 minutes, Chloe. Is that okay? Just keep singing, okay? Just keep singing. So it was almost like...
Do I have my water? Where do I get a refill?
Absolutely. So we just sang and sang and sang and sang and sang, and Tara just showed up, shall we say. She showed up. That sacred hill I will never experience in the same way again. And not only did the children not throwing stones, they were in our face. When I opened my eyes, they were just in our face with people in wheelchairs from victims of the war, and everybody was singing it.
Yeah.
Singing, 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 singing. And then finally, Dalai Lama comes in with the two priests, and they both have beards. And he's talk about humor. So he comes in, and his whole conversation about how he doesn't understand why people are so lonely in the West, right? So he comes in and he gets up onto the stage, and suddenly there's this kind of biblical moment because it's been pouring with rain, and suddenly the sun comes out and the clouds are cleared, and he's up on the stage. And the two leaders have these beards, and he has the presence of mind to take their beards and bang them against his head. It's absolutely extraordinary. And then he's like, what just happened? And then he stops, and they both look a little bit kind of, "Whoa," but that was kind of interesting, but kind of friendly.
I know,
So
was he trying to get them to laugh?
it brought the house down. It
Okay.
brought the house down.
Yeah. Okay.
Everybody was like,
I'm catching a theme here.
yeah. And then His Holiness goes to the crowd. He said, I understand why you might have differences between people of different religions.
Mm,
But when you're the same religion, what is the problem? And he just starts laughing,
yeah.
and the whole crowd is laughing. It just
Wow.
dismantles the whole thing. Wow.
Beautiful.
But
Wow.
it's just an initial memory when you're asking me about that, and how can sound now? And I mean, the work that you're doing in India, for example, and in your own profound practice is for me a real testimony to your and a response to your question.
Mm. Well, I'm so delighted to have had this chance to talk with you, and I hope that everyone watching this is going to enjoy the dialogue as much as we have, because I don't know, for me it just needs to be an ongoing conversation, and I'm just tapping the surface, I think, of how profoundly uh, transformational the sound and voice and mantra is,
Yes.
and everyone who um, has worked with it has different angle and different stories and different kind of nuances of passion in it, and I think it's
Yes.
all so fascinating to
Yeah.
to to see and hear and feel.
Mm.
And so yeah, so the final statement, if I ask you to leave our viewers with one thing that everyone can do right now
Mm.
to help make their voice an instrument of peace. One thing.
Beautiful. I would say to fall in love with your breath and to sound your name and to listen to the quality of silence that your sound leaves behind,
Mm,
and to give more attention to the quality of silence your voice leaves behind wherever you are, whether you're speaking or singing, you know, to let that be your focus of attention.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we'll say goodbye to everyone who has joined us so far. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Chloe.
Thank you so much, Anandra. Every blessing.
It's a
Much love.
pleasure.